Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Welcome to another edition of My Hometown. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and our special guest today is attorney Warren Hoffman. Warren is an attorney admitted to practice in New York for almost 35 years, and he's the owner of Divorce, Separation, Mediation Services of Long Island Limited. Warren has written numerous articles, lectured to members of the Bar Association and general public, and has appeared on many radio and television shows. Warren is also devoted to the legal profession, having been a member of the board of directors of the Nassau County Bar Association, a former chair of the Grievance Committee, and also served on the Judiciary Committee of the Bar Association. Warren also devotes substantial amounts of time to providing free legal services, known as pro bono, for members of the public who cannot afford their own attorney. In addition to all of the above, Warren is a volunteer pilot, and he flies for an organization known as PALS, Patient Airlift Services, which transports patients by plane when they need medical care and cannot afford the transportation that's involved. Warren, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, good afternoon, Jim.
Warren, I have to ask you about what really is divorce mediation. We know about divorce and we always think of two warring people, but what is the mediation part?
The idea of mediation, it's a form of what's known as ADR, or Alternative Dispute Resolution. And ADR comes in a couple different forms, but the notion behind it is that people don't necessarily have to go to court to resolve their differences. It's very expensive going to court. It's caused a lot of domestic strife, especially in matrimonial and family matters. And the idea behind it is that the parties, with the help of a mediator, and in my case, an attorney who knows the law and can give them various options, can really resolve their own differences themselves without a judge having to make those decisions for them.
Now, we just use the word mediation, but I think a word that's maybe more common to most of us is arbitration. Are the two the same thing, or if not, how do they differ?
They're really not the same thing. They're both forms of ADR, as I mentioned, Alternative Dispute Resolution, but the idea behind mediation is you have an independent mediator, one person who meets with both people, who explains the rules, the laws, what their options are, as opposed to arbitration, where typically people know it as more as binding arbitration, where one person's going to hear it almost like a judge would hear it, and that one person makes a decision for them. So in mediation, they make their own decisions, the parties. In arbitration, more typically, the arbitrator makes the decision.
So is this almost like they get together with a third party, the mediator, but they're settling matters? Is that another way to look at it?
That's exactly how it is, Bill, yes. People are able to settle their case through mediation just like they would if they were in court, because if we go to court and we do litigation, they're still going to end up settling the case. The idea now is that we try to settle it before you go to court without the cost and without all those issues that, put upon them. And more important, when you first meet with a judge, very often the judge will say, I don't know either one of you. Truly, I don't care about either one of you. I'm here, I'm doing my job, and you're asking me to make decisions for you and your children for the rest of your lives. Why not make them yourselves? And that's kind of what mediation does. It sort of gets the people to make those decisions before they get to court, before they put their issues in the hands of a judge who really doesn't know them that well.
And honestly, that just makes so much sense. I mean, because people are determining the rest of their life. It's like saying, what college do you want to go to? What profession do you want to work in? Would you want a judge deciding that you should be an accountant or a plumber or maybe in your case, an airplane pilot? You might like that, but you might not. And here they can make the decisions themselves and with a little help from the mediator, balance things out and work it out fairly.
Precisely what it is.
Now, it sounds funny, but does divorce mediation only involve divorce?
No, it resolves all aspects of a family dispute when they're separating their lives, whether it's a divorce or it's a separation. And it involves divorce, separation, custody, child support, equitable distribution, we call it, which is basically dividing up all the marital assets, spousal support, which other states call alimony. It really covers every single aspect of resolving their marital issues.
So it's not just breaking up two people. You're taking care of the dirty work. Let's put it that way.
Everything from beginning to end. And because also our mediation company is owned by myself, being an attorney, unlike some mediation companies that are run by only mental health professionals, we can take them from the very beginning of an intake all the way through getting them a judgment of divorce from the court, which other people who aren't attorneys can't do.
Now, even though I'm a retired attorney, I have to admit this is a totally different world. We're getting into a world of specialties today. And I was asking you before the show, does someone come into you and just say, two people, husband and wife, or is it usually a wife or a husband, and say, I read about this mediation stuff, I want to take part in it? Or do two attorneys come over? Do the people need attorneys if they're involved in this? Take us behind the curtain a little bit.
Excellent questions. What normally happens is that I'll schedule an orientation session. I'll typically get a phone call from one or the other, the husband or the wife, but I will almost always ask them, does your spouse know you're calling me? Does your spouse intend to cooperate in meeting? Because we need to have that first orientation session when I meet the people. I'm meeting them for the first time. They're meeting me. I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me because I need to make sure these are people who could really work together for mediation. Otherwise, I'll tell them, and I do this sometimes, I'll have to say to people, this is really not appropriate for mediation. You need to go get separate attorneys and fight it out in court because there's just too much distrust, there's too much lack of cooperation, too much hatred between the parties. When they first come to us, I don't necessarily expect them to have resolved any issues. They could resolve nothing at all. But nonetheless, when they do finally come to us, they have to be willing to be open and be willing to talk and listen to me and take some advice and listen to some options and work together. When someone calls me the first time, sometimes they'll say, well, I'll come on Monday, my spouse will come on Tuesday, and that really doesn't work very well. They need to sit together. We do everything together in one room, so they may not like each other, they may not care about each other any longer, but certainly they have to be able to work together.
And although your company is Divorce, Separation, Mediation Services of Long Island Limited, and we know you're an attorney, in this role, you're not acting as either party's attorney. Am I correct?
Excellent. Yeah, excellent point. You're right. No, I'm not. I act as, we call ourselves consulting attorneys. We work with both parties. We do not represent either party. And in fact, from the first time they come to meet me, just for an orientation session, if it's not going to work out through mediation, I cannot, at that point, even represent either party against the other one, because in my mind, I have a conflict of interest just having met both of them for the first time. And you brought up one other point about attorneys. Most of the time, when people come to us, most of the people have not yet, certainly haven't hired attorneys, but haven't seen attorneys. Sometimes they have. And I tell the people that during the mediation sessions, I really don't want to have attorneys there during the sessions because I think attorneys act like attorneys and they try to control the situation. And that's not really what I want. But one very important point, before they're ever asked to sign any final settlement agreement, the agreement is drafted, mailed to them, and they're told, show it to an attorney, a friend, a relative, anybody they want to show it to, but show it to somebody if you feel more comfortable doing that. So attorneys do have a role, but the role is typically at the end, not during the process.
And that's a great point, I think, to make, because, as you said, and not in a negative or bad way, attorney's role is to fight for their client. Mm-hmm. And if they're doing that, you may get bickering and kind of throw a little fuel on the fire, where if the parties come to a pretty much of an agreement, 95% of an agreement, the last few percentage points, I'm sure, can be worked out. And then you do need the attorneys to look it over and make sure legally it's covering each base. And if there's something that's not covered, or maybe they forgot to tell you or bring up, that gets covered so there's no disputes down the road.
Absolutely right.
Warren, I think this is very important for people. And honestly, most people, I think, are unaware of it, to be really fair to you. So could you tell us, if someone is interested, where are you located? How would they get in touch with you? What's the first step?
Okay, so our office is in Garden City. It's at 600 Old Country Road, Suite 302 in Garden City. And our phone number is 516-746-0868. And what happens is that when I get a phone call from somebody, I schedule an initial consultation free of charge to both parties.
Wait, no charge?
No charge for the first time.
Is that coming out of a lawyer's mouth? Mm-hmm. I've never heard that before. Okay.
And seriously, no, but it's important because I don't know if I necessarily want these people as my clients. If I can't do a good job for them, if I can't really resolve their issues because their hatred is so deep or their distrust is so strained between the two of them, they're really not appropriate for mediation. So I really want to meet with them the first time and make sure it works right. And I explain all the laws to them, just like I would if somebody came to me as a private client. And because I do a lot of litigation work as well as mediation work. And I change my hat and I wear my mediation hat. And my goal is to explain the rules and let them know what they're going to face going forward.
I think that's a great point for people, because I think sometimes people realize the marriage is over, but there's this strain of hurting the other people, the children, the relatives, everything that's involved. And here it's two people coming in, breaking up the assets as they feel fair, and maybe custody, things like that, and visitation, whatever other things that you know about. And then the lawyers get involved, and I would assume it's much quicker, too.
It's an awful lot quicker, and it's an awful lot cheaper. We typically, if you don't mind me explaining the process, sure. What normally happens, the people come for the first orientation session. At that point, I tell them, I don't want to get started tonight. I want you to go back and think about it, and then call me if you want to schedule an appointment. Now, I work with a certified mediator. So it's myself as the attorney and my certified mediator. My mediator does most of the actual mediation sessions, while I'm there to explain the laws and explain how the process works. So we work together, and our fee is inclusive of both people together. So they come to us, we have a consultation, they come back for the first session where they meet the mediator and myself and the two parties all get together, and we start that first session. And we typically run a session for about an hour and a half or so. If it's going very well, it might be longer. If it's a little bit tense, it might be a little bit shorter. And they come back hopefully week after week until the process is finished, at which time we draft the agreement and mail it out to them for review.
That almost sounds too good to be true. That sounds like you could get it in the weekly TV show where they show you 6 months in about half an hour.
But time-wise, you asked, it's about typically the average couple about 4 or 5 sessions.
Really?
And if you're doing it weekly, you're talking about 4 or 5 weeks. And then drafting the agreement and mailing it out, typically 2 to 3 months from the time they came in, they're finished with a legally binding signed agreement.
Friends I know going through divorce in court, they start out with black hair and they have gray hair or no hair by the time. I'm joking, of course, but it's usually a multi-year process because, as you know, there's motions involved and that takes time. And then there might be an appeal. So the actual divorce could be anywhere from a couple of months to 3, 4, 5 years or more.
Absolutely. And because they're putting their own agreement together, there is no appeal because it's a process that they both have agreed to everything. So it really works very, very well. A lot faster and a lot cheaper.
And less mental stress for the people and the children, the family, and everybody else involved.
Absolutely. In litigation, when you don't do mediation, there's actually an attorney that gets appointed by the court for the children, called an AFC, or attorney for the children. And the parties only pay for that, but now a child has to be involved in having their own attorney. So you have the wife's attorney, the husband's attorney, the attorney for the children, the court representative, the judge. And it's a lot of people involved in a system that the parties really, in many, many cases, and probably most cases, can resolve it by themselves.
I would say to someone hearing this, just give it a try. I mean, if you can't, it's okay, or if Warren won't take you, or if there's another company that does this. But it seems certainly worth a try, and it frees up the courts, and it avoids that bitterness that we all associate with divorce.
Yeah, and we just had, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, we just had someone asked us recently about our success rate, because it just came up at a recent consultation with a set of clients, and my mediator and I talked about it, and we've been in business for 25 years already. And we've had probably 3 or 4 cases in 25 years that have not settled. I'd say we have easily a 98, 99% success rate in what we do.
Now, that leads into another question I have. What kind of training does someone like yourself or the divorce mediator and the attorneys involved, is that special, or is that a special aspect of law school, or a certification or classes? How do you get to be good at what, as you are, at what you do?
That's a great question. From my standpoint, I am not only an attorney, but a trained matrimonial attorney. That's what I've done for almost 35 years now. So I have the expertise in the matrimonial or the family law part of it, and I've gone for specialized training myself in mediation. So I have been trained to do mediation work as well as lawyer work, because it's such a different aspect of what we do, from the litigious, aggressive type litigation we do in court versus mediation, where we try to work with everybody, which is sort of against our nature as attorneys, as you know. But my mediator also has gotten certifications as a mediator. Actually, she came to me 25 years ago looking for a job. And I said to her, if you're willing to devote yourself and go get certified but there are national organizations that certify mediators. If you're willing to go do that, and she did, she went out, she paid for herself, she came back to me with her license and her certification, said, oh, I'm certified. I hired her, and we've been together for 25 years already.
Warren, we want to find out more, but once again, I'd like you to tell our audience, if someone is going through this or they kind of sense that this might be on the horizon, Our guest today is Warren Hoffman. He's an attorney specializing in divorce mediation. And again, tell us how they could reach you.
Okay, our phone number is 516-746-0868. And our address, we're in Garden City, and we handle cases in Nassau, Suffolk, and the 5 boroughs at 600 Old Country Road, Suite 302 in Garden City, New York.
And if you didn't get that, we'll give you that once again in the